Hi there, welcome to Boxing Deep Dive. I'm Lyndon Hosking, and welcome to a whole new 2022 version of the Classic Fights. Got some great fights in store for you throughout this year. I'd like to bring in my co-hosts, Grant Tassie Brown and Peter Maniatis. How are we going there, guys? Do we have a good break?
Yeah, all the best for the new year, guys, and all the best
Happy New Year, boys.
for the New Year's.
It was, it was only, 3 weeks or something off, but it felt like it was about 3 months. I was having withdrawal symptoms. That's why we're here probably a week early.
I've had messages from many people saying when he is back, Big Bill Hack down in Tassie, hello Bill. Everyone's messaging saying the best show on pretty much in Australia. When he's coming back, boys. We missed the Peter and Tassie quizzes. We meet the sharp wit and experience of Lyndon and the occasional cameo from the great Mike / Mr. Africa Altamura.
Yeah, it'd be great to have Mike back at some stage, but I'm not sure he's going to come back, Pete, because he looks like he's having the time of his life over there, doesn't he?
Yeah, good on him.
Good on him.
I'm sure he's
I wouldn't come back either.
The African coffee and the African culture.
Yeah, and he's doing great things.
Well, you know where Mike, when he goes for his daily run, all the kids following him, they say, Mike Bumbaye, Mike Bumbaye.
I reckon they would over there too. I think it's it's not the Mike Altamura show, of course, but I think it's been good seeing him. He's been over there. He's been working out. He's been at the fights. He's doing everything over there. So yeah, as I said, maybe he'll run for the president of the Kenyan or African Boxing Association or something over there. But if you're watching, Mike, can't wait to have you back.
Yeah, no, he's good at what he does, our friend Mike.
He is. He's very good, and looks like the Pro Bellum is about to get things rolling. So tonight, guys, we've got a really good one. It's back to me for this one. I can't even remember what our last fight was, but I just know it's back to me. And I've got a really good one tonight that I'm really excited about, and it is Iran the Blade Barkley taking on the living legend Roberto Duran. So you can see there it's for the WBC Middleweight Championship, and it took place at the Atlantic City Convention Centre February 24th, 1989. So, Tassie, it's probably not classic in the sense of, well, Roberto Duran's obviously an all-time great, Iran Barkley probably not, but the whole circumstances and of that of the fight was, and obviously the result was just one to remember, wasn't it?
Lyndon, you've nailed it tonight. It's one of my favourite fights, mate. Honestly, I watch this fight with my mum and dad regularly. My mum actually loves this fight. This is my mum's favourite fight. To be honest with you, it's look, the Blade Barkley is probably most known for his 2 wins over Tommy Hearns. Two big wins. I think I don't know how many titles, 2 or 3 titles he's won. So all around, but the Blade Barkley was a great fighter. Roberto had sort of gone into a weird path where he lost a couple of fights that he probably should have won. And then he probably they thought he might have been gone. Then he sort of really got his act back together. And this was a massive fight for Roberto and a massive, the end result was huge for him. So, and it was just a really, really good competitive fight. I mean, it's this is a great one, mate. I love this one.
Yeah, and Pete, at the time, as Hassie just said, Duran had a bit of an up and down few years. He'd done, 5 years earlier, his career looked over when Tommy Hearns knocked him out in really brutal fashion in the second round. He'd had a few wins, probably more losses than wins in that time. I think he'd had 3 losses in the couple of years before fighting Barkley. Barkley, of course, was coming off the knockout win, the upset win over Thomas Hearns. So not really many people actually gave him a chance at all, did they?
No, they didn't. Obviously, it was promoted by Donald Trump as well at Trump Plaza. So had a good feel to it. And look, Iran Barkley, what can you say about him? I mean, he came to Australia actually in 1995 to fight Tosca Petrides, and I actually spent a bit of time with Iran Barkley. He was training at the Underworld Gym, and he actually went out. He fought on a Sunday, and he was out at a nightclub Friday night, but he wasn't drinking. He was actually at the Carousel on a Friday night. And how do I know that? Because I was there as well and bumped into him. And so he wasn't drinking though. He said, I'm not drinking. He said, basketballers do it in the NBA. We all go out. We'd rather do that and sit at a hotel. He was just having a juice and he was just mingling. And it was 1995 and it was good to meet him. But he'd always had like a dropped eye. And that was, and you saw the eye injury sort of flare up in that Roberto Duran fight, and he kind of was getting hit with right hands he probably normally wouldn't be getting hit with. But yeah, it was a stellar performance from Duran because, I mean, Barkley looked good knocking Hearns out in 3 rounds, and Duran's form was a bit patchy leading up to it, and everyone thought, well, I'm pretty sure the bookmakers had Barkley as a slight favourite. And what, we'll go into the fight, but, what a roller coaster fight it was.
Oh, it was a brilliant fight. And Tassie, I remember at the time, like Pete said, not a lot of people gave Duran a chance because he'd been patchy, his weight was up and down. You just didn't know which Duran was going to turn up, where Barkley, as we said, was coming off the win over Hearns. But I remember at the time, it was just... it was one of those fights where you just didn't know what was going to happen. And I think the second Duran made his way into the ring, you could tell he was actually in good shape. And you could tell he was up for it. Barkley, on the other hand, was really keen to avenge his good friend Davey Moore's defeat to Duran, which had happened 6 years earlier. So all those sort of ingredients put in, it just made it a really spiteful type of fight, didn't it?
Yeah, look, it's never a good mix when you put emotion into a fight. And I think he probably had a bit of emotion, Barkley, wanting to revenge the Davey Moore loss. But isn't it funny how styles make fights? And that's the truest word ever spoken, because even going back to the Hagler, Hagler destroyed Hearns. Hearns destroyed Duran, but Duran went up and almost beat Hagler. And this is the same, but Barkley, knocks out Hearns. Hearns destroys Duran. Duran comes back away. It's just amazing styles, and that's why you can never pick anyone. No one's really a certainty in our sport because styles do make fights. It's just crazy.
They do. And Pete, the size difference was really noticeable too, because Duran, Barkley was a big middleweight. I think he was 6'1", 6'2", something like that. Even though obviously Duran had already fought Hearns, who was just a freak. But he was a big middleweight, a big strong middleweight. And even though he'd been pretty much obliterated by Hearns until he pulled out that unbelievable right uppercut / hook that he knocked Hearns out with, when they were in the ring together, you could obviously see that size difference, that he was so much bigger than Duran.
Yeah, but the thing I liked about Duran in this fight, his speed was pretty good, and he was getting off on Barkley and landed some nice shots on him. And then when he started to bruise his eye up, and his eye obviously shut, because Barkley did have eye problems, he was basically a one-eyed fighter, and he got it with some big shots at the end that swung the fight Duran's way. I mean, if Barkley's eyes didn't puff out like they did back then, I wonder how it would have gone if he had been able to have 2 healthy eyes leading into the fight.
Well, you'll see in the fight in the second, when we put the highlights up, that those swollen eyes did obviously come back to bite him, because he ended up getting nailed by a brilliant right hand from Duran. But the other thing, again, we'll go into it after the highlights, but just another thing I remember watching it live on the day is the emotion of Duran and his fans. It was very similar to Davey Moore 6 years earlier. But we'll get into that after the fight, probably jumping ahead a little bit there. Let's get into some highlights, and we'll discuss it afterwards. I'll just turn down the volume a little bit here.
Because Duran was always trying to win back the no mass thing that happened. He was always trying to avenge that. I feel, he really wanted to get his Panamanian crowd back on board. So, yeah, this fight and the Davey Moore fight, I think, got him back up there.
Yeah, and
Duran hurt Barkley early. And that I think that was a big statement. He hurt him early, wobbled him early in the fight. Yeah. And that was the best thing for his confidence, for mine.
And I think you're right, Tassie, about the styles make fights, because you see that straight away here. Duran was always that nice, composed, you come to me type of fighter, and Barkley was just the perfect guy in hindsight that just didn't know anything else except to come forward. And he really just played into Duran's hands the way he wanted to fight, and really nullified all the advantages that Barkley had.
Yeah, and Duran was so good, fighting inside, and he's so good about moving his head. Like, he just sometimes just roll under a hook, and he was so
right hand.
He's very, very clever fighter, Duran, and he made him miss a lot and made him pay. He counted a lot.
Yeah, he had great defence, didn't he, Peter? It was actually underrated, I think, how slick and how he was inside. He'd tie the hands up. He'd spin you to the side. He was just the master of that type of boxing.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the guy's a Hall of Famer. He's a legend. He knows every trick in the book. He's a born fighter. That's as simple as that. Obviously, he's not a natural big middleweight. He started at lightweight and won titles there, but his class just carried him through. And the fact that Barkley's sort of one-dimensional, it was just tailor-made for Duran to have his biggest moment for a very long time, because he'd had some flat fights leading up to it, obviously. And this was, you always give one champion one big explosion in the sun, and that was his time to shine again. And you couldn't have picked a more perfect time fighting for the WBC Middleweight title of the world. And it was Barkley's first defence after beating Hearns.
I just remember, I couldn't believe, Tassie, watching it, that it was only 5 years earlier, as I said earlier, that his career looked over when Hearns demolished him in 2 rounds, and to see him 5 years later fighting this beast of a guy, the Blade Barkley, it was just amazing.
Yeah, I was only reading the other day too that bloke died, the Englishman that upset him too. I think it was in might have been in Detroit or wherever it was, but that English guy that was handpicked by Duran and he upset Duran.
Yeah.
So he suffered a couple of losses.
Copeland Lang, I think that was.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So look, he'd sometimes you never know what Duran would turn up, but if you got the right Duran like this one, then you're obviously, he's very hard to beat, But yeah, so
well, that's the thing, isn't it, Pete? Sorry, Tal, I was just going to say, Pete, that's the thing, isn't it? You would have thought Barkley, when the first round started, when you could see that Duran had turned up to fight, you think, geez, my luck, because it's probably exactly the same Duran that Davey Moore ran into 6 years early, when, again, Duran was patchy back then, and just turned up and they just put on a performance.
Yeah, I mean, all the great fighters have got that massive big fight in them right at the end. We saw Pacquiao do it with Thurman as well.
Yep, exactly.
They just got that one big explosion left in the sun. And Duran's just a natural fighter. Everything he does, right down to his bootlaces, he's tailor-made for boxing. He's just made for every little dummy, every little move. He knows how to pivot. He slips. He's just natural. He knows where to do it, when not to do it. And Barkley, as we mentioned, I mean, he's a real tough, strong, punching fighter, but he's one-dimensional. He was just tailor-made for Duran.
He is. And that moment there, Tassie, where Duran dropped him, I was in the pub. I think I was 16, 15 years old. I think I was watching it.
In the pub?
And I remember jumping up, screaming. It was just one of those, it was an unbelievable moment, and I would have loved to have been there live to see it.
Well, I hope you were drinking orange juice
as well.
I was drinking raspberry lemonades, I think, back then, but yeah.
Yeah,
Donnie was in the crowd as well, Lyndon, your man.
What's that, Pete?
Donnie was in the crowd as well, your man, front row.
Yeah, he was. Donald Trump was there.
Trump.
And he was actually big in boxing back then. He obviously was part of the Tyson-Spinks fight a year earlier as well.
Yeah. Yeah, put on quite a few fights.
So the last round here. It could have been anyone's fight here.
Joe Cortez, always fair but firm.
And I think even though Duran was obviously a lot older and he fought such a smart fight where he really conserved energy and really made Barkley push the fight to him and counted him all night rather than the other way around. I think it was a really smart move in hindsight that he didn't push it. Obviously, I think he was about 38 years old here.
Yeah. Yeah, when you have the most experience as Duran did, you know how to conserve energy, you know when to have a bit of a rest and when not to. And I guess he let Barkley throw a lot of punches and he made him miss. And when you're making guys miss, it absorbs a lot of energy when you're not, So he just knew every trick in the book, like Peter said before. He's a born fighter, and that's why he's one of the greatest pound-for-pound fighters of all time.
I love that, how he stood in the centre of the ring. It was a bit like when he fought Leonard.
Yeah, it was, yeah. Just his whole thing too, just the whole, personality and the machismo of Roberto Duran. He was just, unbelievable.
Yeah. So there it was, Roberto Duran with a split decision win over Barkley. And what surprised me a lot in the aftermath of it was the scores, and I've just got them here. it was 116, 113 for Barkley. So what's that? 7 rounds to 4 with 1 even. The other judge had it 8 rounds to 2 with 2 even for Duran, and the other one had it 8 rounds to 4 for Duran. So just an unbelievable swing of the scorecards there. But I don't think you could argue, Pete, that Duran deserved the decision.
Yeah, for sure. And the fact that he was 38 years of age, and we're talking back then in 89, 38's like 60 now. That's unheard of. Because the fighters were 30 back then. You know, when you get to 30, they used to say, mate, you're 30 now, you want to keep going on.
Yep.
This guy's 38 and moved up to middleweight. And this was in the 80s, you know. Like, I mean, Larry Holmes making a comeback at 36.
Yep.
They said, you're a dinosaur, don't do it. And he was a heavyweight. So a massive effort from Roberto Duran. One of the crowning efforts in his career. You've got to give kudos to where it's due. To do what he did, he had, you know, scratchy form leading up to it and has this big moment, especially to win a WBC Middleweight world title. Just, yeah, one you put down in one, you know, that makes him one of the greatest of all time.
Well, Tuzzy, they had sort of varying careers after this. Duran would go on and lose the next fight in the trilogy against Sugar Ray Leonard, which, yeah, it was not probably a great way to end the trilogy. He'd also lose after that to Pat Lawler when he injured his shoulder. Yeah. Had a few ups and downs. He fought Vinny Pazienza a couple of times, Camacho. Probably just more sort of dream fights, more than, I suppose, for the supporters.
Money fights.
Yeah, he lost to William Joppy, Omar Gonzalez, which is a bit of a shame, and lost to Hector Camacho in 2001. That ended his career. Barkley, on the other hand, lost his next 2 fights as well. He lost to Michael Nunn, Nigel Benn when he was knocked out in the first round, which is a real shame to go out. He also lost to James Toney, Adolfo Washington, Henry Mask, Tosca Pedritas, as you said before, Pete, Rocky Gannon. So yeah, there's a few losses there. And I must say, like yourself, Pete, I actually met Barkley as well. I'll bring you in a second, Tassie, but I actually met him in New York. It was actually a real shame, Tassie, that he was actually homeless when I met him in 2015, I think it was. Really nice guy. Gleason's gym took him in, let him sleep at the gym, and were trying to get him back on the feet. But it's just a real shame, isn't it, when you know your great fighters and your favourite fighters end up that way.
Yeah, he had a gambling problem, Lyndon. That's how it all started. He'd gamble on everything. He'd gamble on 2 flies up a wall.
Yeah. And
he'd chase his losses. And there's 2 things that will send you broke: a drug problem or a gambling problem. Well, he had a gambling problem, and it just ruined him. And when he was in Melbourne, I mean, to come here to fight Tosca Petridis, I think Christopher Cronus paid him 80 grand, which was massive money. 80,000 took to get him out here. I don't know how much he would have ended up in his pocket, but because I was close with Christopher Cronus and Tosca, and we all spent time with him at the gym and took him around, and it was just good to hang out with him. But the people around him, because it was clear then that he had money issues, basically said that he just can't help himself with gambling. He just can't stop it, and every type of money he gets, he wants to gamble, and that's probably the worst thing when you've got a gambling addiction and a lot of money and a lot of spare time. Things like that can ruin your life, which it did.
Yeah, a lot end up that way, don't they, Tassie? And as I said, it's a real shame that you see your all-time favourite fighters that end up that way. And I couldn't believe it when I met him. I mean, as I said, he was a great guy, but I just thought this is Iran the Blade Barkley. You know, it was just not good.
Same thing as Rocky Lockridge, mate. I mean, you know, Baron Michaels, he was a great world champion, and he ended up home. Look, it happens so much. I mean, look, I tell you now, boys, there's more sad stories in boxing than good stories. I tell you now. Yeah. You know, you give me one fairy tale story, and I'll give you about 50. But you know, even in Australia, like back in the day, the great Ron Richards was drunk, getting knocked out by young kids at the pub. You know, saying they knocked out a legend. You know, and all sorts of things. Like it's a sad sport. It's a great sport, but it can be a sad sport.
Yeah, Peter, does it really? And you're obviously been there as far as a manager and you know, of fighters, and probably, hopefully, things are changing these days where these fighters are getting better management behind them that maybe set them up on the path to maybe invest the money. I think back in the day, they were earning the millions of dollars, and the fact they ended up with nothing obviously shows they had people robbing them or putting bad investments. But do you think it's changed these days, with better managers out there that are setting these guys up a little bit better?
Oh, look, I reckon everything's changed these days because you've got the internet, Google search, so you can get on Google and look up prices of things and look up instructions. If you're ever stuck, you just Google what you need to know and it tells you. Back in those days, there was nothing like that. And people trust other people or they'd fall into vices or what have you. And, look, you can't blame anyone but the actual individual. If you've got an inclination to be a drug addict, it's going to come out. If you've got an inclination to be a gambler, it's going to come out. It's not boxing, it's not no one. Everyone's responsible for their life, and you make choices, and then you live and die by your choices. I mean, if you win $1 million gambling, you get a pat on the back and a cigar. You lose $1 million, you sleep on the bus stop. So that's what gambling's all about. You want to gamble, you want to be a drinker and take drugs. You'll probably have some great nights. Then once the money runs out and you got nothing and you got depression and you start borrowing money and get into debts and stuff, life changes very quickly.
They're doing a few shoeies at Kittens, Pete.
Yeah, but I'm drinking the cheap champagne, Tassie. I'm not getting anything, nothing over $20.
That's right.
Lyndon can give us a sponsorship, actually.
Yeah, I can do that. But I think overall, guys, Tassie, I suppose all that aside, we can look back at what, as I said at the start, it wasn't necessarily a classic fight in that we've got two all-time greats. Duran was obviously the all-time great, Barkley wasn't, but the fact, just the whole circumstances surrounding it and the significance of it at the time. Sorry, mate?
But Barkley's got 2 wins over an all-time great, he deserves to be there. And Hearns, I think he come back and still won a few after that too. So look, he was a great fighter, mate. Look, to win a world title, to win a world title, but to win more than one, I mean, you're a great fighter, and he was a great fighter. Right. So it was just. Mate, it was a great pick, Lyndon. It was a great fight and one of my personal favourites.
So if you haven't seen the fight, if you're out there watching this, make sure you get on YouTube and watch it. It's a great fight. It's got you on the, on the edge of your seat for the whole way through, especially the last few rounds. So do yourself a favour, as they say, and check it out. So that was my pick for this week, Duran versus Barkley. I think, Pete, we're back to you. I think, Tassie, you had the last one, which was Johnny Tapia and Danny Romero. Mike's obviously, I don't think, back next week. Pete, have you got one in mind, or you want to just keep us guessing until next week?
I think if I had to go one, I'm going to go just for the build-up and everything about it, Costa Ricky Hatton.
Oh, hey, I like that one. I actually had that on my list down the track. That was wasn't so memorable for us Aussie fans, but it was actually a classic fight back in the day. It was massive. So we'll check that one out. Tassie, you going to be okay watching that, mate? We're not going to have to nurse you through?
Nah, not really, mate. I don't like that fight.
Look, I think overall, though, we can celebrate, Costa as a fighter. So we've got to put all the allegiances aside. It's a classic fight segment. So you can just sock your way through it.
I was only talking to Tim today, mate. I don't think I might have to sit that one out, I reckon.
Yeah, probably not a great one for you. But hey, look, it's again, we can celebrate what a great career that Costa had. So well done, Pete. You've just upset Tassie. He's boycotting next week, so I hope you're happy with yourself.
No,
look at him. He loves it.
That's awesome, guys. Thanks again for tuning in for 2022. We've got some awesome fights lined up for the rest of the year. And the week after, we'll give Mike a crack at it if he's back, and then we're back to you, Tassie. So start thinking about.
I just want to say, Big Billy Hack, thanks for waiting for us to come back, mate. You watch it every night, and we're going to keep bringing good content just for you, Big Bill. Yeah,
well said, Tassie. I was just going to say that. I should have mentioned at the start, we've had some great feedback on YouTube and on social media about these fights. Really encourage you guys to actually send in some requests. If you like, same as the dream fight scenario as well, send them in, and we'll do our best to have a crack at them. And because as our audience grows, we want to include you guys as much as we can. So send in your requests.
We might even get a Peter Maniatis fan mail bag thing like Sam Newman used to do with the footy show, mate. You know what I mean?
We had the Andrew Maloney story. I told Lyndon about that. We might as well let the viewers know. Andrew's trying to lose weight, and he's all in the towels like a mummy, as they do. They come straight out of the sauna in their sweatsuit, and you towel them up and like a mummy. And he's there, and Faris is actually losing weight in the same sauna at Star City. And Andrew looks across at me because he was there with Anjo Hyde, and I thought he was going to say g'day, and he said, "How did you beat Tassie in the quiz 4-1 down?" I could not believe he said that. And then he said, "How the hell did you get that last question, Felix Trinidad? You said you didn't know. You plucked it out of your ass," he said. I said, yeah, that mate. So who would have thought of that, Tassie? Who would have thought that we got Andrew?
Yeah,
Andrew
just
Maloney
before his new fight. That's
show.
What he's thinking about. Yeah, no, I've had a couple of people mention that last question, mate. It's going to go down in folklore history as one of the greatest comebacks of all time, Peter.
Down on the canvas twice, Tassie, just in the first round.
Can I say?
I was through the ropes. It was Nigel, Ben, Gerald McCullen. It was Ben McCullen type. I was through the ropes and nearly in. I was into the commentator's booth just about.
Just let me say this though, before we go, it won't happen again.
Never happened.
If Lyndon can help it, he will. Lyndon's encouraging words always spark up a bit of fighting spirit. If Lyndon can keep the spark up, Tassie, it will keep happening.
See how we go. All good, boys. I think we've entered into our Thursday night show as part of the Classic Fight Show, I think. So we'll leave that for Thursday, a bit more chat. But thanks again, guys. Really appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.
See you, fellas.
See you, guys.
Boys.